While most people who go on a carnivore diet don't have a lot of problems other than the transitory problems, diarrhea from diving into carnivore too quickly without transitioning properly, or a return of the keto flu from, again, jumping in with both feet before transitioning without transitioning properly at a proper pace, there are still some people who have problems throughout their carnivore journey. And it often gets boiled down to something called histamines and a histamine response. Regardless of what they're doing, they're sticking to their beef, butter, bacon, and eggs, and having plenty of electrolytes and salts. They are still having what amounts to as an allergic reaction to what they're eating. It makes life miserable. And I often wonder how many people fail on their carnivore journey because they never quite get to the root of what the problem is. So today, let's talk about this, because we need to know, what are histamines? I mean, again, we hear people talk all the time about how they're having this mysterious histamine response to something they're eating. So let's talk about what histamines are, and more importantly, why some people on a carnivore diet are having a histamine response to the beef they're eating, because beef is not supposed to give you an allergic reaction. So what are they? Histamines are chemicals produced by the body to fight allergens. Think of them as the security services of the body. Histamines are a response to things your personal biochemistry doesn't really like, that are not things that will really make you ill in a conventional sense. We're not talking about bacteria or other things here. Histamines help your body get rid of something that's bothering you, in this case, an allergy trigger or allergen. Histamines are a defense mechanism that helps your body get the offending chemicals off your skin or out of your body. This can manifest itself very broadly in things like itching, sneezing, watery eyes, runny noses. You get the idea. If you're like me and have allergens to some things found in the outdoors, you know what I'm talking about. When I was a kid, I used to get a histamine response from grasses and things like that. And I used to sneeze a lot while mowing the lawn and doing yard work, or if I was around cats too much. Though not nearly as much anymore, partially, I suspect, because the carnivore diet has eliminated things that I was eating that were helping to put my system on edge and making it more susceptible to outside irritants. Carnivore diet is almost miraculous in that way. I don't get those kinds of responses to yard work anymore, or cats or anything like that, which is still something frankly strange to me, but I'm happy to report it as a side effect of the carnivore diet. Now, WebMD usually gives too simple of explanations for anything, but their explanation for how a histamine response works here is fine for our purposes. Quote, first, your body sends a chemical signal to mast cells in your skin, lungs, nose, mouth, gut, and blood. The message is, release histamines, which are stored in the mast cells. When they leave the mast cells, histamines boost blood flow in the area of your body, the allergen affected. This causes inflammation, which lets other chemicals from your immune system step in and do repair work. Histamines then dock at special places called receptors in your body. The result? If your nose was affected, say by pollen, histamines prompt thin walls called membranes to make more mucus. You can get a runny or stuffy nose, and you'll sneeze. The mucus can also bother your throat and make you cough. Histamines can make your eyes and nose itch. End quote. And honestly, you can't get much more deeper than that. I go to more harder science carnivore channel for that. But does that sound like an outdoor allergy to you? Like it sounds like to my grass allergies to me. But histamine responses are most well known in the world of food allergies. Peanut allergies can trigger a histamine response, for just one example. In the carnivore world, this comes into play, unfortunately, not infrequently, with people reporting problems eating standard grocery store grade beef. I have a recent video on the topic that you should check out if need be. Grocery stores do a number of things to the beef they sell, or can, and for the purposes of histamine responses, the most noteworthy is the aging process that is part of the standard beef production process. Regardless of the beef, be it low quality, standard grade commodity beef, or things higher than that like USDA Select, Choice, Prime, or even grass-fed beef. If it's at the grocery store, it's almost certainly been subjected to an aging process, typical for about 7 to 14 days. Aging is key to understanding histamine responses. Strictly speaking, beef is a very low histamine food by itself. That is, if it's not been processed in that typical manner. Aged foods across the board can trigger a histamine response. Now, why is that? Because in the aging process, bacteria have their way with the meat or the cheese or the dairy or whatever it is you're aging. The purpose of aging the meat in a controlled environment is to give the beef a more robust flavor. Some of the meat is lost in the aging process and has to be trimmed off. If you've ever watched a dry aging video on YouTube, you know what I mean. But it's worth noting that the bacteria that do the aging get into all the meat, triggering your mast cells to initiate a histamine response to getting the objectionable foreign bodies out of your body. There are a number of things you can do to combat this. You can buy grass-fed and finished beef, which are pasture-raised since they have a higher omega-3 fatty acid profile, which helps offset some of this problem. Or you can find a meat producer who will not age the meat at all, taking the meat from slaughter to freeze immediately. There's not a grocery store that's going to sell you meat this way, though, so you'll probably have to find an online retailer or a local farmer or rancher who will, process the meat in that way. They'll butcher it for you and put it to freeze immediately. One meat seller online that I know that doesn't sell aged meat is Billy Doe Meats. And though I only know that about their lamb, which doesn't have the typical lamb taste that many find objectionable, and that's due to lamb not being aged the way beef and lamb typically are. Another is reportedly a retailer named North Star Bison, who offers all of the following meats that are low in histamines. They offer unaged bison, elk, chicken, turkey, rabbit, lamb, salivate, and halibut. Here's some additional advice from a website called Mast Cell 360, which is all about histamine responses, and it's where I got the information about North Star Bison from. Quote, if you can't buy your meat through option 1 or 2 above, then call the store where you purchase meat. Ask them what day the meat arrives. Let them know you have health issues and need to buy your meat as fresh as possible. When you arrive at the store, ask for the meat that came in that day. Remind them you called earlier because of your health issues. Only buy the meat that came in that day. Then either freeze the raw meat or cook the meat right away and freeze leftovers. Just remember, this isn't as low histamine as buying it frozen after slaughter. End quote. That should be repeated. That meat that you bought that came into the grocery store that day is still aged and won't be as low histamine as buying meat immediately frozen after slaughter. Remember, that meat's still sitting there on the shelf basically for days. So follow that advice if you can't find a local rancher to sell you directly unaged meat, or if you can't buy online for whatever reason. It should also be noted here that if you're having trouble with conventional beef due to histamines, then you're probably having trouble with cheese and other forms of dairy, or you would have trouble with them if you ate those things. That may sound vague, but I personally haven't had dairy at all since 2021, so I don't know if I can handle dairy or not. I look forward to sampling some dry-aged cheese at Christmas, though, as an experiment done in the spirit of the season. As you can probably tell by that statement, I don't have a problem with histamine responses, generally speaking. If aged beef is higher in histamines, then what beef is the worst? Simple. Ground meat of all kinds. This is because ground meat has more surface area for aging than a steak or roast ever will. Don't buy ground meat. Get a meat grinder and grind your meat yourself the day you will eat it. And by the way, when you do that, it tastes better. If you like ground of a certain fat percentage, you can find charts online for what cuts to grind to achieve your target fat content. Meat grinders aren't that expensive, especially electric ones. Plus, you can always add fat to the meat to bring its content up if needed. Remember, butter and ghee exist. The final way to combat histamines is this. Your meat can cause you problems if you let the meat thaw too much in the fridge or on the counter. Cook it while it's still a little frosty on the inside. Once it's thawed, the bacteria begin to get to the meat. That's unavoidable, unfortunately. The other thing to remember is that any leftovers you have should be frozen immediately and reheated from frozen or near frozen to avoid that bacteria problem. Also, and this should go without saying, eating out is probably going to be very hard to do since you have no idea what quality the meat the restaurant is going to serve. On top of all the other issues carnivores will run into when trying to dine out. I mean, most of us just avoid it because of seed oils and cross-contamination and things. But that's, histamines in a nutshell. I'm hoping you found that helpful. Let me know in the comments about other histamine response causes that you can think of, or the names of other meat retailers that will sell unaged meat. I'm not sure posting links in my comments will work, though. So just put the name of the company. And if you haven't, like and subscribe this video. It would be great. It helps a lot. As does sharing this video on social media, it helps a lot as well. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore, and thanks for your time today.